I hope I'm able to convey to you the grandparent perspective and that it may be of interest to you in whatever role you're sitting in front of me, whether that's a parent, a charity, a researcher or a clinician, or indeed another grandparent. The impact of having a grandchild with a diagnosis of cancer is the subject of some formal academic research, and I'd like to come back to that at the end of my talk. And I hope it might spark an idea for some research if that's your area of interest. My own experience in this area started on the 21st of November 2013. I think we all remember those dates. Hattie was diagnosed very suddenly. She was 18 months old, she's now 4 and she's well. Hattie is sister to Dexter, who is now 7, and she's my 3rd grandchild, my only granddaughter so far. Her mother, Katie, is my 2nd child of 4, so it's a big family, my 4 children. Her mum is number 2 of my children. I think that's quite a significant part of the experience. My children now range from 23 to 33, so these young adults are dealing with this little person being ill. Like many of the families that we've met along the way, there are lots of adults significant to these children as grandparents, substitute grandparents, and step-families, and I have met grandparents who are the primary carer. But that's not my personal experience, but there are lots of people involved in these children's lives. In my desperation to understand what was happening to Hattie, to Katie, and to all of us as a family, I spent many sleepless nights in the first year feeling very lost, searching the internet at 3 o'clock in the morning for research into Hattie's diagnosis and possible sources of grandparent support. My daughter laughed at me for joining the Facebook group of grandparents of children with Down syndrome, purely because I couldn't find one for children of grandchildren with cancer, and the Down syndrome people were just so friendly and so welcoming, so I joined them instead. And I still haven't removed myself from it, and my girls keep saying to me, "Mum, you can't keep stalking the Downs children." But they have thousands of grandparents in that group, and they're very supportive, so I just thought I'd poke my head in and have a look. As a physiotherapist, I have considerable experience of reading and reviewing clinical literature, and it became obvious to me that the dangers of Dr. Google. I think I have another slide. Hang on. Let's see, what have we got? There's the rest of the family. So as a physiotherapist, reading and reviewing clinical literature is part of my work, but it became obvious to me that the dangers of Dr. Google when it came to cancers in children are extreme. Out-of-date research, things that relate to the same diagnosis, but that diagnosis in adults, percentages of likely survival in studies of different drug regimes, complex language and vocabulary make reviewing what is available highly likely that the reading itself is adding to the trauma. It didn't do anything to reassure any nerves. My daughter is now able to tell me, and it was only really when I practiced this talk about 2 nights ago, that she felt that when she was being told things in the other room, very often when I was doing the playing in that room, she was in another room getting the information. And she felt very much that the clinicians around her were coaching her in how to cope, how to understand the results, how to focus on what she needed to do for this week and not to look at everybody else's results or to compare notes in the kitchen. They don't tell grandparents that, and you're making the tea in the kitchen and you do compare notes. They specifically said to her, don't ask the other families what's going on with them. They've got all different, everybody's situation is different. And I think the coaching and the care that's taken in terms of giving information to parents is fantastic, and it needs to carry on. The problem was, what she couldn't do was to come out of that room and find the words or the energy to pass on that information in its entirety. So she would pick off what she thought any particular individual in the family needed to know. And that would mean that you would have a little bit of information, which, as we all know, is extremely dangerous at times. As a plea then, there is a reminder here to clinicians that there may be anything from 1 to 8 potentially grandparents. There are lots of split families. My partner is not Hattie's grandfather, but he's effectively her grandfather. So there are lots of those sorts of people in those lives. And I know and appreciate, we all appreciate the time and effort that you need, excuse me, to do your job with our little ones, but could we work together to come up with better ways to provide parents with the tools to pass on important and relevant medical information to the rest of the family? In talking with other grandparents, and in one very insightful research paper which describes the grandparents' experience as doubled and silenced, doubled in that you're worrying about your child and the grandchild, and silenced, oh, that's the alarm, nice picture that I'll keep it going. So the doubled and silence is a paper. You can find that paper, and I have the reference if you'd like it. It's clear that the difficulties faced by grandparents not only involve the immediate child and the grandchild, but their siblings and the extended family. This is the bit that made me well up when I did it yesterday, so bear with me. Sitting at the top of the family, or in my case and many others with the generation above me, still alive and well and worrying as well, is a precarious position. In the rest of our lives, my children have been able to turn to me for guidance, dare I say wisdom, or at least experience common sense. In this scenario, I felt a sense of fear, panic and grief, which was at times crippling. The changes to the family dynamics are profound. Grandparents have told me of losing jobs, being unwell, or simply being at a loss to know how best to support everyone. One of my daughters works in my business, and the impact of us both in still running and leading a large team has taken its toll on both of us. So my message to you today is threefold. Is that family? That's a nice picture, isn't it? Is threefold. If you are a clinician, can you consider how in your work you might better promote the benefits to the parents and children of involving grandparents throughout the treatment by perhaps checking how information has been disseminated to the rest of the family? On awards, can you make better use of us? We've got idle hands. You know, we're not necessarily doing the clinical things that you're teaching those parents to do. I mean, Katie was taking all sorts of tests and being involved in blood pressure monitors and all sorts of things, and that wasn't my place to do that, but I would have scrubbed the kitchen, cleaned the toys, gone and fetched the nurses' sandwiches. I'd have done anything. Find us something to do. Put a list up in the staff room. If things need doing, there's some willing hands there. If you're a researcher or a charity looking at projects to research, could you consider the paucity of literature which might be the basis for future study? The existing literature seems only to come from the southern hemisphere or the northern USA, where the practicalities are quite different. Oncology units are thousands of miles away, whereas we may have our grandparents a lot closer, not always. But even Newcastle to London is closer than some of the distances that are experienced in the studies that come from those parts of the world where the distances are much greater. If you're a parent or a grandparent here today, encourage the grandparents to seek each other out. There is now a Facebook page of grandparents of children with cancer. You can find that through, and I'll give you my email address. There you are, and you can find it. It's very closed. You can find it if you search grandparents of children with cancer, but you can't see anything because we need a safe haven to discuss things. Some of these children have already died, and some children are very, very poorly, and some are recovered. And I think those difficult conversations, which are, how can we best support you, knowing that you might have already faced the thing we're most fearful of, or that your child is better, and you might have that sort of survivor guilt thing, but you still understand where we're coming from. So encourage the next generation to find each other, because I think we have there's a few grey hairs knocking around that could perhaps support each other better. No one should feel as isolated as that first few months when you're on your own at 3 o'clock in the morning, not in the hospital, but wondering what on earth is going on. We need to face this monster together. I think that's it. I think that's enough.